Yes.
Jam den den jam be yong la cha za lo kang ge lo de dem nye den nye tra nom da rab zra ve chi nye den ge chi ye ze ni Re me zre dung ren yu gu chi nye chen ze ra zhe nam den da jin sa ju tar zhen yin den lu zo jia se tu gu chun trai chu dan chu nye jen de da le me zhen jam be yong la du zai den chi chi chen ra hu zre je da lu de mu men ba ra sra ne Ca dan den ju zhong lu do pa ye lu zhi pa bian nong wa zao tu so kong ge tu je zhe je da wa dam je nam mong ba den jen den yong ten ba gong ko dam de la da sha cha le jia mian sha na du je jin re ze sa ye nian bo de ba nam ba sa le nam ge nian bo shang ba kun du zong因为世间就老少节，我这个更多世界他年来，他们给上面少用东西，像就明白啷个干嘛把那些的为就做给对。那时候，的呢，他三八兄弟做的都接待学生罗能。
So please listen attentively to the explanations that will be given on the basis of you having generated the body mind.
당은 저 야셀라는 소데마 생긴데게 갑라 단 육 갑달래 되버래 디난 디인투 다 테네 육갑들라 쇼로카스 카세레도 쇼로카 숨주 숨주 들라 소니레데 이래 숨주 소니 바데렌도 대 숨주 소니 바데 상주 셈바 연지 예바당 쩐당 텐저 가디영 말링 세베직들에
We've come to the 32nd of the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. Where the advice or instruction rather to not speak of the faults of other bodhisattvas is of great importance.
다데 가르렌도서나 뇽무 원키 야세 진다키 녜빨렌나 다니 냠주르베 대바체라 죽베 공사키 녜빠멘나 야세라는 연 송에.
So the text here reads as follows. Due to the strength of the obscuring emotions and beliefs, speaking of the faults of bodhisattvas defiles oneself. Thus, not to speak of the faults of others on the Mahayana path is the practice of a bodhisattva.
다데송데 당가랑게 녀무 페나 단데샤 셰동 뜨무 그노치게 고네 데네 상슈선바 인탕 yase yin tang ti mai ba tamal pa chi ge nye pa yang zan ne lin ne jonjuk che ju yo ma re song re.
Here the instruction to not speak of the faults, imagined or actual, of other practicing bodhisattvas, as well as of everyone else, whether a bodhisattva or not, is of utmost importance. To speak of or to broadcast or spread rumors about or speak of imagined or actual faults of others due to passion, aggression, and ignorance defiles oneself.
Di tsik nana karasong dosana nyamung wang ki songya chidwala. Tapena pinsim sangbochi ta tene tawa nyambate tawa nyambala dobe che to.
Pensum sangpo tene?
Vena me pinsim sangpo chikon.
Korana pen togere che.
Ya korana pinsim sangpo chikon achi ko jöngen de chindo de chipongro chena tembe sambake nyepalena jön yo mare che.
Sampatsam.
말이 디삼배 끝을 홍대 바로 오빠나 총장장 통되게 미치라 때네 삼바성바 아체 닫고 총통나 내감 나그래 다르도 되네 벌바동인 성부 주차 그래 되네 대자는로 총기견 야 되네 랍나 디 견데 렘바테 예빠 말에 송비요.
Now one has to go about this intelligently, evidently. If, for example, someone is addicted to drinking alcohol, which is a fault, in that drinking alcohol is detrimental to the health of the person himself who drinks, as well as difficult for others around him. Because of compassion for this person, explain to him about the different consequences of alcohol addiction in order to save him from experiencing the grave consequences of his addiction, such as perhaps in the end taking rebirth in a lower existence. To explain about that to the person who's addicted, in the hope of helping him to give up his addiction. That, of course, one should do in order to save him from the consequences of his addiction. There, to explain about the faults or explain about the faults of another person, even to him, to speak of those faults is not what is meant here. However, when doing so, one's motivation should be one of wanting to help the person, not to, for example, put down the person or belittle the person. That would not be okay, evidently. Speaking about those faults to this person is to be because one wants to help him.
Penna yang michige tenju shinju lo rabo ta de che zam de ga na shin gi yin na yang tawa shinju lo rabo sim de ki ji la pensim zang bu den ne de ma che de tawa de nor de do de ne charang ke tenju de zam ba yin na 다 미진다 너그레스 뭐 딩저라고 다 딩데 망고 라자 잠네 핀심 고니 잠나 예빠 메바 마세 게자시라 펠그리 송
Another example would be talking to a person who upholds a wrong view, whatever that view may be. We may take the view of a person who is about to write a book about various effective warfare strategies. To explain to this person that your view is not a good view, it will bring harm and suffering to many, and it is also not good for yourself to publish such a writing where you in detail promote various types of warfare strategies, for example. However, again, when talking to this person, it should be out of concern for his welfare, explaining to him that this will have grave consequences for yourself and for others. And therefore, one tries to convince the person to not go ahead with this type of publication, to not even write it. That is not a fault. That, or by way of doing so, one actually accumulates merit. Good circumstances will come about because of giving this advice to this person.
Tim Mayimpa Pena Trado Dow, Tenen Drindur Sambado, Tende Sambe, Goodness Lonte, Donna Yomug Samba Karina Yang, Gonu Ti Gone, Yenke, Tawala Junje, Jopala Junje, Tende Cheb Deva Yina. Tene Ngaran Shonju Sembe, Jopala Nyamba Mase, Tene Ngenrotundro Ju, Chegi Yore.
On the other hand, for a practicing Bodhisattva, to be, when speaking about the faults of others, be motivated by, for example, jealousy, or the intention to compete with someone, and the like, whatever the emotion or belief that motivates the person who speaks to others and about others in terms of their perceived faults, achieves nothing but defiling his own code of conduct as to the path of a bodhisattva, both in terms of view and conduct. That is the case. And this type of behavior, namely to speak about the faults of others, whether imagined or actual faults, defiles oneself, and in the end the consequence in terms of the law of karma is rebirth in a lower existence. It is very serious to speak of the faults of others due to the strength of one's own obscuring emotions and beliefs. This has grave consequences for that person.
Te kande chandu yorsana, pen trado don drinsim kisamba jinte ge ngarang kisemde marang machepche. Ti ge ne.
Lasso?
Ti ge ne, jebu tambachi la, then kurwa tabayina, shindu dikbele chapshinjis nrogyo.
So, to continue with the same context, a mindset flawed by jealousy and the intention to compete with others, that mindset is from the viewpoint of Buddhism in general and the path of a Bodhisattva in specific, an inappropriate mindset in that it contradicts any Buddhist code of conduct, in specific the code of conduct of a Bodhisattva. And if the target of the person who speaks ill of someone else, if his target is a person accomplished on the path to enlightenment, then of course the consequences will be even more serious than in the case of an ordinary practitioner, in terms of speaking ill of an ordinary practitioner. Of course, quite naturally, it is worse to speak ill of a person who has actually accomplished some level of realization on the path to enlightenment, and that therefore would have even worse consequences than that of speaking ill of a regular or ordinary practitioner.
Tiyang penna shiwala ke tandela kansargo. Durjit na zongte kwe nang parwa. Nyepar chapshin yung kwe yun zeng te.
De Kyebu Dampa?
Ya. Penna Kyebu Dampa shongchuk tu sem jeba ji yinna.
Kyebu Dampa?
Kyebu Dampa shongchuk ku sem yun kin ji yinna. Jeba te. Shongchuk sem yu la jebe Kyebu Dampa te. Kamsum ji sem jen tam je yewa meba pende duguyin sen tam je shabe mirawa. Ti indu kamsum ji sem jen tam je ki jenda re de yore.
Kamsum ki sem jen tam je ki kata res?
Jenda.
Jinda?
Jembe da por he de rawa. Nye konso kanga pen tabi se pena leinda namina mirewe gen tam je ti je shabe mirawa.
Ja.
Ya, tende jigla, tene kurwa tamna, tene hachang li nyepa lapshin yore songre.
Now, the well-known Indian Buddhist master Shantideva said in this specific context that of speaking of perceived faults or made-up faults, perhaps if the person who speaks ill of the accomplished other person is motivated by a competitive mindset, then perhaps what he says is made up even. Whatever the case, to do so is exceedingly detrimental in terms of the person who launches the accusations, as it were. And the Indian Buddhist master Shantideva explained why. Why this is much worse, much more worse than speaking ill of an unaccomplished practitioner, for example, or a regular person in the world. Well, one has to keep in mind, Shantideva said, that when one speaks of an accomplished person here, one is referring to someone who has truly awakened to the body-mind within, and who therefore, to one extent or another, embodies the body-mind. And that kind of person has taken the following pledge, namely, to, in an unbiased manner, benefit and work for the welfare of all sentient beings throughout all world systems, in order to save them from suffering and the like. Therefore, this accomplished Bodhisattva is a sponsor of all sentient beings. It's someone who does good for everyone. He doesn't just sponsor in terms of benefiting others, a specific group of individuals or beings. He, without any bias whatsoever, focuses on benefiting all. He's doing universal good, as it were. And it's precisely therefore that there are exceedingly grave consequences in terms of launching accusations about perceived faults in this person to others. Kan risnatini dilla drogi marava, dilla drelva chagi marava, mi shenta. Da semchintam chigi jindare sumsonga.
Yeah.
Tene da mi shenta odi yabumindu sondishi ma husenate koranso. Yeah.
Penna jiktin di na ngara pain tanking miji na ro.
Yeah.
Tele nge tenen longjar chebe na chame ko dupore segro.
Dela
tenchembe churchunga de la lente dupo je paching ge sondo mejo bangamba me marab dupore se choto ne yang na minchi bu yo songa. That jongchim sambal chem gore songa.
If one thinks about worldly good customs, one is that if someone has helped you or provided services to you without asking for anything in return, simply because of the person in question wanting to be of help to others, if there is a person like that in your life, and your response to the good the person did for you is to reject that person, speaking ill of that person, and so on, then, even in terms of regular worldly customs, this is seen as inappropriate, as not good at all. It does not speak well of your character. You're seen as a horrible person, actually, who respond with rejecting and speaking ill of someone who has done nothing but provided services for you, have supported you, and so on and so forth, in various ways. So, if people in the world has that view, there should be no need of speaking of those on the path of a bodhisattva, and that it's wrong to launch accusations about perceived faults in accomplished individuals, and that would be more grave than the example of what may happen in the world in the same context, simply because the person spoken ill of embodies the body-mind to one extent or another, and is therefore someone prepared to and wanting to benefit all sentient beings equally.
Perna Teyang Sanjeki Jambal Shupen, Jambal Shune, Dochiginan, the Songdoa, Jampal
Jampal Yang?
Jambal Yang. Jampal Song.
Sanjeki.
Shangchup Sempachik La, Shangchup Sempachiki, Trola so the same Jene.
Trova.
Yeah. Ta Trova, Trado, Rinsem Jisem Jene. Tella Mapa Siki Pejot number Yina. Tedang Nyambetang. Rani Nyalvenes Jegre Song.
Kang Dang Nyampe Trang?
Penna Shangship Sambachigla, Kodukja Shidayore, Kojopa Dukjayore, Kochigre, Nires, Jum, Jagorwa. Junji, Jena Kalbachi Yavan Rogre, Journey, Jena Kalbani Yavan Rogre, Sone, Sonjek Songsha Chapter.
Re Darava. Cirta mirtangi chanchup sempa la kyönden Jänner yang mena chanchup ki sem ngoma kede kingi chanchup.
Matchita mitna penang chanchup semje damba shu chanchup chopa labjimbe kongsa chigla. Sosu chewe yinayendra. Tene tagana hing sanegi sempa chamboji yinayendra.
There is a quotation in the commentary to the 37 practices, which Khenpo Rinpoche uses for his explanations. There is a quotation here where Buddha Shakyamuni advises Manjushri in terms of what we've been talking about, or he simply Buddha Shakyamuni voices the consequences of behaving in the way that has been described to Manjushri. One may presume that this is from a sutra, and perhaps Manjushri had asked Buddha Shakyamuni a question in this regard. Here the Buddha says, Manjushri, if one practicing Bodhisattva, due to his anger or jealousy or wanting to compete with that other practicing Bodhisattva, because of his anger or jealousy, whatever the source of the whole thing is, if that practicing Bodhisattva belittles and speaks ill of another regular practicing Bodhisattva, just once, that has the consequence of rebirth in a hellish existence for an entire eon. If voicing perceived faults about his fellow practitioner on the path of the Bodhisattva happens twice, then the consequence would be 2 kalpas in a hellish existence, and so on and so on. Each time the person in question belittles the other practicing Bodhisattva, another kalpa of suffering in a hellish existence is added to his portfolio of his personal karma, as it were. So to just, because of one's own obscuring emotions and beliefs, launch attacks on other practicing bodhisattvas, voicing perceived faults there is this type of consequence in terms of the workings of cause and effect, named the law of karma. That's just the way things work, organically as it is, or as it were.
Tejen yang sanje ge depa lan jukba singen do ti nang tu
Depa la jukba.
ya
Depa la jukba. There is another sutra in the commentary Khenpo Rinpoche uses, named Engaging in Devotion, and there is a quotation from this sutra in the commentary saying,
jirtane shangju samba yinai da shangju samba mayin pe semjin yin ge jön la yang ngarang ta je zan ma dong song.
In general, Buddha Shakyamuni here says, or gives the advice, do not examine others as to possible faults they may have. Whether you're talking about a bodhisattva or a regular person in the world makes no difference. There is no need for announcing the faults of others. And when saying the faults of others, these are the faults perceived by the person who announces, as it were, those faults to others. To do that at all is not advisable, the Buddha says here. Now, whether the person one focuses upon has the faults one sees or not makes no difference. There is no need for announcing the perceived faults of the person at all to begin with to others. There is, in fact, the Buddha said, no need for anyone to walk around and examine others in terms of what faults they may or may not have. It's nobody's business even to do so. Furthermore, the Buddha said, the more or the higher degree of degeneration that develops in various world systems, such as our world, as time passes, during degenerate times, it would be difficult to find a person who has no faults at all. Particularly in the degenerate times, the effect of announcing perceived faults in others to others has no benefit at all. The person one speaks ill of will be very upset, perhaps angry, perhaps furious, and the person who has announced the perceived faults will end up disliking the other person because of how bad he looks to him. And the combination here leads to nothing but conflict and strife. And nothing good comes of doing that which causes a conflict.
대인테 다원은 연기 쩐나 맞다와 티랑기 쩐 가르치긴도 면도 랑그랑도 되어서
It would be better, and it is better, Buddha Shakyamuni says, to look at oneself and to examine oneself in terms of one's own faults. There is no need going looking for the faults in others for whatever reason.
오늘 딱제 당시에나 되네 나랑 대주대 나랑의 체와지 짠 요마레스.
In terms of examining oneself as to one's own faults, that may be very successful. Why? Because there is no one who knows oneself better than oneself. One will truly find out about one's own faults, and therefore, if the response is to correct oneself, that would be a good thing. Whereas examining the faults of others and announcing the faults of others to others, nothing good can come of it.
Tene ran la kyön yo ba de she chuna. Ta kyön yo ba shekin suchi nga duk pai ba hakwana nga dur tang marwa. Te yar tang.
If one discovers that one actually isn't a very good person at all, which is very likely, it is not some impossible task. Tene
te ngara ta thong dur tang marwa. Su ina yar tong de yu dura.
Then it may be that one's reaction is to stop oneself in terms of developing faults. Of course, there might be those who don't see it like that, but a person who has a sense of morals would feel bad about himself having this or that fault, and therefore correct himself. So it's a good thing to look into one's own faults rather than the faults of others, the perceived faults of others. Point being, when you're looking into whether another person is a good person or not, as it were, you're doing so on the basis of judging that other person from your own vantage point. You can't read the mind of the other person. You cannot really know for sure whether the person has the faults you think you've discovered or not. It may just be imagined on your part, even. Or it may be that there are actual faults. In either case, as was said, announcing those faults and talking about those faults, promoting doing so to others, nothing good can come of it, just conflict.
Tene tagana shinge ta jebu tamba sonchip samba singe de suyin sumi marazu san chetig maresu.
And in terms of an accomplished individual on the path of a bodhisattva, none of us can judge who is accomplished and who isn't. As was just said, when one looks at another person, as one is a regular person, one can't read the mind of the other person, and therefore the faults one perceives may not even be there. It's a very dicey thing to go around and judge others and then speak of one's personal judgments about another person to a number of people. Because the perceived faults one speaks about may not even be at hand.
배당 제대 송제그래.
Chödrak pareve.
야. 나저 깔럼난데 진짜 농용. ngama 잡아 예. 다 산내지 런잠 요서와. 잡아니 때 개바 첨부랬어. 되는지 가주 슈비어랬어.
Chikla karese?
가주 세대 가르스나.
Akachu.
야, 산제기 송랍 배싱아도 삼쇼 댕아 툴로 통크인사로와. 지금 메나 란잠바스네. 딱 권내기 메드레.
Rabjampa, tenne?
야, 제도였어.
Sumpa shipa gitsen kandri.
Samba yevan이 그 chen 믹스 송마소. 되네 예바들 연대자는 메르스.
인 konsukhanga kepare songsoa.
말이 콘소 나네 캐파니여서와.
아 kepani.
야. 되네 대체 다 콘전 좀 되대 되네. 다 잡아지 도저 연대 연ken시라면 ken테게 라브레스.
Batalaka.
바탈라카 이게.
Sumpa korani.
산제 근도이 난도 gelong yignanda sonju samba ji yue song res.
Ore,
되네.
Aha.
가주 지 인카 카지 멘도스.
Kachu yinka kachi mindu.
멘도 란정 인카 카지 멘도스. 캐타레테 캐파쳔보레테 녀몽두스 라브레스. 나네 메스 라브레스 쿠크.
Aha.
다 연대 멘켄데 코네 칼라인다 칼라인 그감 고스지 지나에 그 테칼로식 말 코도 말했어. 저도 욕쇼 제레스.
Koran kari yokshu.
욕보 중킨 잡았어 좀 못하게 욕보 죽스.
Dini?
되는 뒤 예티들라 라갈라마를 묻혀서 응시 통매 직통계지 요레스.
Lakalama.
야, 내 되네레 바코네레 라갈라마스게.
Lakalama. Bako sena kavaduda.
네, 야나다 산점 배겼어. 데 덴마르 요가 뒤쪽고 있어요.
Lakatuko.
나가쪽고 고고마치 된다. 델라노시 통매 요레스.
Ngonshi tome.
야. 대견도 서색인데 곧 요고 주메데 제너스 그 남주지래요 그랬어. 인다섬도 가야 그래요 말했어. 뒤인데 핫산 고고 말했어. 근데 미진기 쥐는 맞네. 꼬르와자는 맞다 송 그래.
Lakatuko.
이진을 못해 송 그래.
Ajishinobu.
야.
So, there is the following example given by the late Karmapa, the 16th Karmapa, Rangyung Rikbei Dorje, to Khenpo Rinpoche and others who lived at Rumtek Monastery and who were guided by, in their Buddhist education, by the late Karmapa. Apparently, I don't know if it was on just one occasion or on several occasions, never mind, the Karmapa had told them about the following story. He had said to them a long, long time ago, there were 4 monks who met and who conversed together. 2 of these 4 monks were great scholars. Their names were Kachu and Rabjampa. Actually, these are not actually given names. These are titles that became names in the context of the scholarship of the 2. We don't need to get into those details. Then there were the remaining 2. The third of the 4 monks was someone who knew a bit about this and that. Not an accomplished scholar, but also not entirely ignorant as to scholarship. And then there was the 4th of them who didn't know much at all in terms of scholarship. And the third of the three, the one who knew a bit about this and that, but who wasn't an actual scholar, said, well, it is said in the scriptures that when 4 individuals of monastic ordination who practice the path of a bodhisattva come together, it's the case always that one of them will be a true bodhisattva. Who of us could this be? He said. And then he went on, I don't think it's either Kachu or Ravjampa. They are very, very learned. However, one can notice afflictive, obscuring states of mind surfacing within them from time to time. At least that's what I've noticed. And as to our 4th member of this group, well, he doesn't know anything. He can't even read properly. So of course it can't be him. He should, in fact, while we stay together, take care of the rest of us, cook our food and the like. He should take care of our needs because he has no qualities. So you have number 3 here. And we can see from what he said that he appears to want to create the idea that he is the bodhisattva because in the group, the true bodhisattva, because he said the 2 scholars, no, and the 4th, not a chance. Who's left? He himself. So perhaps he was motivated by a sense of competition or wanting to be important, whatever. Anyway, it appears that in the neighborhood there was an accomplished lama staying, known as Laka Lama. And the place in question where they all met borders with China in terms of the borders of old Tibet. So it was far out in East Tibet that this meeting happened, and that's where Laka Lama, known for being someone who could, without any hindrance, read the minds of others and foretell the future and the like. And he had apparently come to know about this conversation. Perhaps he had met the 4, the story doesn't tell. And he said that the 4th in the group, the one who was relegated to the status of a servant to the others, he was an emanation of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. So we can see that number 3, who judged the other 3 in terms of how he saw them, what faults he perceived in them, was completely off. So in terms of faults that one may perceive in others, one may be completely wrong even. And then to go on to announce those faults that are not even at hand to others, one can imagine it's not very constructive or good, and it would contradict the practice of a bodhisattva to do so. Now, this sort of thing is very common. It happens all the time. People do this all the time. Perhaps not all the time, but it's very frequent.
Shamaram Chig Jindan Nane, Shede Nang la Junju Sik Sarse the tree, the Negorshi pepper ganzo.
Chödrak sar ne nekor pepper.
Neko pet, Dojade.
What?
Then, yes, so at that.
Chödrak sar ne.
Ya Junju treat Sarseg, Tabat.
Treat sarse.
Ya, then air Michel so at them. Tak Ponzo Kanga Junju treats a yin to tobacco song. Tang Taba, Tenzola, Yashin Joseph Shondam Chinoro Nangshu.
Yeah, Chen Chuso.
There's a major to Yevo Nanchen, pay chocolate Yavas and Nanso. Tea captala, Nazo Samek Tamela, Tene, Dogja Dupo, Low Najumatam, pay the inside.
Lokasa?
Natung Chimendo or Samsung. Natu to Juning Party.
Ngapchu Trukchu Gibar. Travachik.
Ya, Trache pet Dupuchkundo. Koran Shig Mesig. The Yen
Layang treats us, Kong de non layore.
Yomade.
Yoma.
Pen Sanjo Achresha. Dojin Tuson, then Tasani Java Shamarke, Shondam Jinam Yusaranga Shuchog Ere, Totab Contra, Chita Signal. Then Adam Jershu Nang Chosons, then Shondam Nons. Shondam Nons, Medic Shondam Shutan, then Chicken Jinsare, Sanson Rujanto, soft that. Thing is, Yema Kong Jean, special to see in it. Zane Tamanyo Kakashi, say insect. Then it's sugar, Rinpoche Jekachi Charson. Rinpoche Mombo chicken on Jeka Charson, Pesasa, Chen Zix on the Tagentan. Take Yeman and so Jekatsar Ponso Lotsa, the Rinpoche Nasho song, Titagin the Chungo she song. Messi, Tendet and the lesson she. That is on you some champuch rem the Inchi, many. Chödrak to do the song. That never gesture or call Chödrak not about Niedik in hand to issue. Nesons come into Chödrak Japtava, Niedik in your hand. Then I'm quite say song. Then Cheshamar show song to say. That chick up June on end of China say. That ye patience on that thing. Take on pesote, person the Rinpoche. Neche Suyin Hakoson sons. Suyin Hakoson, Chege, Dene, Tumu, Norona, Zong Church, Song Sharoches, Darin Charang,
Song Che,
Dene Charang, Roson, some of the net and beans. Then
Dekarang, Latsachik, Sung, Re, Kanang, Re,
Dodged in Chetin, Chison Ronans, Te Daring and Nekon Rogu, Yam the Pesho sons. Take one got under the chin, that did not so Malcolm Tontra like Kurson, take Joshua. Son Linkimento, Net Lamek or Sapay, you intend son mess. That Lamek. Sugar matching our song with the dish on chips and champions rain to song. Pacha Papa changes the one to Shinjala and Mitch 10 rain to song. But it's in that 2 you do a gap.
In 1983, this was during the many years that Khenpo Rinpoche was the head Khenpo of the Nalanda Institute at Rinpoche Monastery. And in 83, Sharma Rinpoche, the late Sharma Rinpoche, Khenpo Rinpoche, and a group of the students from the Nalanda Institute were at Bodh Gaya during the winter holidays. And the monks that had come, some of them had just prior to traveling to Bodh Gaya completed their studies of the Bodhicharya Avatara, engaging in the deeds of a Bodhisattva, authored by Shantideva. And Khenpo Rinpoche asked or requested Shamar Rinpoche one day to please give the Bodhisattva vows in the vast conduct tradition to this group of students who had just completed their studies of the Bodhicharya Avatara. And the late Shamar Rinpoche was very pleased about the request, and he gave the Bodhisattva vows according to the vast conduct tradition in a very extensive manner to these students in Bodh Gaya. Now, just prior to this giving of those Bodhisattva vows, presumably at the stupa, which commemorates the enlightenment of Buddha Shakyamuni, there was a monk from Tibet who appeared to be about 50, 60 years old, with quite ugly features and with very, very poor clothing, who approached Khenpo because he had heard that Shamar Rinpoche would the next day give the Bodhisattva vows according to the vast conduct tradition at the stupa. And he asked Khenpo if it would be permitted for him to assist and at the gathering and to take the Bodhisattva vows. And Khenpo Rinpoche said yes, that's fine. And during the giving of the Bodhisattva vows, Khenpo Rinpoche noticed that this monk seemed to know quite well the different parts of the giving of the vows and so on, and thought to himself, well, this monk is someone who is learned. And he had asked him afterwards, where have you had your Buddhist education, and under the guidance of whom have you studied, and so on. And the monk had said, no, I don't know anything. I can barely read the texts. My only accomplishment is I know the alphabet and not much beyond. Khenpo Rinpoche, of course, didn't really believe him, but what to do? That was his answer. Now, after the giving of the Bodhisattva vows, as is tradition, there was an audience with Shamar Rinpoche for those who had participated, where they give an offering and so on, in consequence of having been given the vows. And so this monk also came, and Khenpo Rinpoche noticed that Shamar Rinpoche took an extra good look at this old monk, but didn't say anything until everyone had left. And then he asked Khenpo Rinpoche, do you know this monk? Where does he come from? And Khenpo Rinpoche told him what he knew, which wasn't much, but a bit. And Shamar Rinpoche said, you know what, this man is a very great Bodhisattva. Go and find him for me and bring him here. Which Khenpo did. Not too difficult to find, because this monk, he lived and slept and practiced in the park surrounding the stupa, which commemorates the enlightenment of Buddha Shakyamuni. He had no dwelling to go to at night. He simply slept there outside. And so he was easy to find. Khenpo went and found him and told him that Shamar Rinpoche had asked him to come and see him, and the monk had said, "Oh dear, have I done something wrong or so?" Anyway, he came with Khenpo Rinpoche to Shamar Rinpoche, and Shamar Rinpoche told him, "I know who you are, and I want you to recite the path of aspirations according to Kunto Sangpo, the conduct which is about universal good. And tomorrow we are all going to visit some holy places around here, and I ask you to come with us all." Just a second. Di ne kola nyam usho pepsho digi jela kan. And Shamar Rinpoche told him, "I will see to your expenses. You do not need to worry about any expenses." To which the monk responded, "But I have no qualities that could justify me receiving a gift from an accomplished master like you. This will not be good for me karmically to do so." To which Tene Shamar Rinpoche di nga da korang re di yashu di kan so ne na.
Tene Rinpoche di nge koryong tanda in che manin tambe so.
Rinpoche rangi korjong.
Yeah, Rinpoche rangi korjong tanda yes.
To which Shamar Rinpoche responded, no, I won't allow you to decline this offer. I am making this offer to you in order to purify myself of having received gifts, offerings, and so on. And I won't permit you to decline. So apparently the man joined the pilgrimage the next day. And after he had left, he had said to Khenpo Rinpoche, "This is a very great Bodhisattva, blessed by Avalokiteshvara himself."
And
the pilgrimage they did lasted for a week. They visited the ancient University of Nalanda, the holy places in the region. And every day Shamar Rinpoche would ask the monk to come, and they had long conversations with one another. We do not know what they spoke of, but every day they met and had spent quite a lot of time together conversing with each other. And Shamar Rinpoche said on many occasions to Khenpo, "This monk is a great scholar and a very great Bodhisattva." He also informed the students of Nalanda Institute who were also on the pilgrimage, saying, "Never judge another person in terms of their appearance and the like. You will never know who you're judging." Shamar Rinpoche on one occasion had told Khenpo, "This man knows by heart a collection of 21 sutras and tantras. he recites the texts from memory. He is a great, great scholar.
Te rangin ngaran su yin na yang gongsa ke zopta ta tenten ramen da yib ta tulo ta tenzo tan zawa ni ne jön de jeye yo ma de jön jen na rani nyambe ju cha gre song ya.
And Shamar Rinpoche has said one should never judge another person on the basis of his appearance in terms of how he looks, what he wears, whether he knows something or does not know something, and so on and so forth. These sort of judgments that people make about other people are very often incorrect, false impressions.
Ti ndo ngaran su yin na yang jön de rang tak chen na de pe ke cham ko.
So main point here is examine yourself in terms of your own faults and leave the others alone.
Mato danda meli gene ngazo ngone thane ngakchat ti gene ngakchal gene dipam bosagre pe.
Otherwise,
one
will be prone to engage in gossip about this and that, and spread rumors and the like, not really knowing what one is talking about at all. It's just, to quote Greta Thunberg, blah, 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 and nothing else. And nothing good will come of this. So to take care in this regard is very important. Instead, Patrul Rinpoche said, look into your own mind in terms of finding your own faults, as it were, whether you're acting in a virtuous manner or a non-virtuous manner. This is what you need to keep track of, nothing else. And if you find yourself all alone in the home of someone else, perhaps the person has left and you have to sit there and wait for him to come back or whatever, never mind. If you find yourself in the home or of someone else or in a place that's not yours, keep track of what you do with your hands, because otherwise maybe you'll pick up a nice thing and put it in your pocket. In Asia, it's very common that people who sit and wait for someone, when seeing that there is a nice pen on the desk, they'll pocket it. This is a very common habit of people in Asia. For one reason or another. We don't know which reason. And when in the company of others, take very great care with what you say, how you conduct yourself in terms of conversation, the words you pronounce to others, and so on. Very often in a crowd of people, what the conversation ends up with is one of gossip. And when gossiping, people tend to speak of the faults of others, the perceived faults of others. That's all for today.
Sunam de Yadam Jezekbani, Tomne Yebe, Danam, Pamshete, Jagana Je, Balap Trubai, Sigbe, Sole, Drowa, Dolwar.